The storm began before the rain. Nathan felt it in the air. That heavy stillness before a heart finally breaks. The wedding invitation sat unopened on his kitchen counter, a simple ivory envelope carrying the weight of his past. His wife, Claire, and his best friend, Marcus. Two names that used to define safety, now etched into betrayal. He stared at the envelope, as if it were alive, pulsing with every beat of his racing heart. Yet beneath the anger, something colder whispered. A strange calm, the clarity of a man who had already died and was now deciding what to do with the remains. The city lights bled through the rain-streaked window, and in that reflection, Nathan saw not a broken man, but a sculptor preparing his final piece. By morning, the storm had passed, but the silence left behind was heavier. Nathan poured coffee into a chipped mug, the same one Claire once called their first home relic. He held it as if it might still contain her warmth. On his phone, her smiling face appeared again, an engagement photo tagged by mutual friends. He didn't look away. He didn't cry. Instead, he began to plan. His revenge wouldn't be loud or cruel. It would be art, a gift they would unwrap together, and in doing so, unravel themselves. He visited the storage unit that afternoon, unlocking years of forgotten sentiment. Boxes labeled with her handwriting stared back at him. Summer clothes, wedding photos, keepsakes. Every label carried a ghost. But in that place of dust and decay, he found something sacred, a box of letters they had written to each other before marriage, sealed with wax, tied in twine. That was when the idea bloomed. Not to destroy, but to remind. That night, he sat at his desk, surrounded by ghosts of ink and paper. Letter after letter, her words poured like honey and lies. You are my home. You are my forever. He read them all, then began rewriting each one, not in hatred, but in truth. His truth, the truth of who she became and what they had broken. He sealed them again, each with the same red wax, and placed them inside a velvet-lined box. By dawn, the box was ready, a relic reborn. Nathan wrapped it in silver paper and tied it with a simple white ribbon. There was no malice in his heart, only precision. It wasn't vengeance anymore. It was closure disguised as a gift. When Claire and Marcus opened it, they wouldn't just remember him. They'd remember who they were before the lies. The engagement party shimmered like deceit, wrapped in gold. Nathan stood outside the hotel ballroom, watching through glass as laughter echoed over champagne flutes. Claire glowed under chandeliers, her hand resting easily in Marcus's. The betrayal looked almost divine from a distance. He wasn't invited, but that didn't matter. His gift had already arrived hours before, wrapped in silver, with a handwritten note that read, "For your forever." The silence in his chest felt cleaner than joy, sharper than grief. Revenge, it seemed, could also be artful restraint. Nathan didn't linger. He turned from the window and walked into the night, letting the hum of the city swallow his memory of her voice. At a nearby cafe, he sat facing the street, stirring sugar into black coffee he wouldn't drink. He imagined the moment I'd open the box, the shock, the confusion, maybe even nostalgia. He didn't want to destroy them. He only wanted them to remember that every perfect beginning has a cost. In the ballroom, Claire and Marcus found the box placed neatly among their gifts. The silver paper gleamed under the chandelier as if demanding attention. Claire smiled, assuming it was from one of Marcus's co-workers. She untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, her own handwriting stared back at her. Her letters, everyone she thought, long gone. The air shifted. The laughter dimmed. For a moment, only the sound of paper filled the silence. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was hers, but the inked words beneath had changed. His annotations in the margins, raw truths written between her lies. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, reading in silence. The air thickened around them. Smiles faded. Conversations stopped. One by one, guests realized something unseen had fractured the evening. Claire's face drained of color as she read the last line. "You taught me to love the lie. I taught you to live with it." By the time Nathan reached the riverfront, the night had quieted into something almost holy. He leaned on the railing, watching his reflection ripple in the dark water. Somewhere across town, they were discovering every word he'd rewritten, every truth he'd left behind. He didn't need to see it. Closure, he realized, wasn't about being understood. It was about letting go without disappearing. The city breathed with him, and for the first time in months, he felt free. The morning after the engagement party felt like an aftershock. Claire sat at the edge of her bed, the opened letters scattered across the duvet. The words wouldn't stop echoing. Marcus paced the room, silent and restless, as if searching for a version of her that still made sense. Nathan's handwriting wasn't angry. It was surgical. Every line sliced through the illusions they built together. And for the first time since her affair began, Claire felt the full weight of what she'd done, not just to him, but to herself. Marcus finally spoke, quiet, careful, as though words themselves might shatter the air. "You kept these." His voice wasn't angry, just stunned. Claire couldn't answer. She wanted to explain, but there was no version of truth that didn't sound like betrayal. Marcus lifted one of the letters, reading Nathan's notes in the margins. The handwriting cut deeper than any confrontation could. For the first time, Marcus realized he wasn't the hero of this story. Nathan spent that same morning walking the shoreline where he and Claire once took photographs on their honeymoon. The sea hadn't changed. It still moved with quiet power, disinterested in the smallness of human heartbreak. He thought about calling her, about saying one last thing, but he knew silence was stronger. Forgiveness wasn't something you offered to others. It was something you wrestled into yourself. Back in the city, Claire sat at her desk with one final letter, unopened, sealed with red wax. She recognized it instantly. It was the one she had written but never sent. Her confession, her apology, the one Nathan was never meant to read. He had included it among the others, untouched, as if to say, "I already knew." When she finally broke the seal, her own words stared back like a mirror she could no longer avoid. Nathan returned home that night, his apartment still echoing with emptiness, but the silence no longer scared him. He opened the drawer where the invitation once lay and found it missing, a reminder of what he'd already buried. On the wall, a single photograph of Claire remained. He didn't take it down. He simply turned it around. Sometimes, healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to face it differently. Days passed, but silence still ruled the apartment. Claire avoided her reflection. Marcus tried to pretend nothing had shifted, but every word between them now trembled. The wedding planner called. Claire didn't answer. The ring on her finger felt heavier than gold. It felt like a verdict. That night, she sat in the bathroom with the light off, rereading one of Nathan's annotated letters. The ink had begun to fade, but the truth still glowed beneath every line. Love built on deceit collapses under its own beauty. Marcus retreated into silence. He spent long nights alone in his studio, trying to paint something that didn't remind him of her or of Nathan. But every color he mixed bled into guilt. The canvas stayed blank for hours, the brush hovering midair. It wasn't just jealousy, it was shame. He had stolen a life, not built one. When dawn finally came, he looked at his reflection and realized he didn't like the man he'd become. Meanwhile, Nathan found himself drawn to new places, the quiet corners of the city he'd once ignored. He began photographing strangers again, capturing faces that didn't belong to his past. Through the lens, he rediscovered empathy. Pain, he realized, was universal, but so was the will to keep going. In every shot, he saw fragments of himself learning to breathe again. Claire couldn't sleep. The apartment felt haunted, not by Nathan, but by her own conscience. She began visiting the places they used to go, tracing ghosts through the city. At the old bookstore where they met, she found a copy of the poetry collection Nathan once gave her. Inside, his note remained. "When we lose love, we don't lose its lesson." She pressed her forehead to the page, tears smudging his handwriting. That night, Nathan returned home with a roll of newly developed photographs. As he hung them by the window to dry, he noticed something in the final frame. A reflection of himself smiling faintly, almost without realizing it. It was the first honest smile since everything had fallen apart. He exhaled deeply, a small tremor of peace in his chest. Somewhere out there, Claire and Marcus were still unraveling. But for Nathan, the unraveling had become a kind of freedom. The wedding was supposed to be in 3 weeks, but invitations began coming back unopened. Claire avoided calls from family, and Marcus canceled the caterer without explanation. The silence between them was no longer anger. It was absence. Every room in their apartment echoed with what they refused to say. One night, over untouched dinner, Claire finally whispered, "I think we broke something we don't know how to fix." Marcus didn't argue. He just nodded, his eyes sinking into the candlelight like a man realizing he'd reached the end of something that was never truly his. Nathan began running again. Every morning before sunrise, he followed the same path through the park, past the bench where he and Claire once sat, past the fountain where he first told her he loved her. At first, it hurt. Then it healed. Each breath became a small act of forgiveness, each mile a quiet release. By the time the sun climbed over the city skyline, he felt lighter. Still scarred, but alive in ways he hadn't been for years. Claire couldn't escape the feeling that Nathan's presence still lingered, not as a ghost, but as conscience. She reread the letters one final time, this time not as condemnation but confession. Each word carried the voice of the man she had destroyed yet somehow freed. She realized the greatest punishment Nathan had given her wasn't exposure or shame, it was clarity. He'd made her see herself without illusion. Marcus left before sunrise, suitcase in hand. He didn't leave a note, and she didn't stop him. There was nothing left to fight for. The ring still sat on the table, its diamond dull in the early gray light. Claire stared at it until it lost all meaning. A small circle that promised forever and delivered fracture. Somewhere deep inside, she finally whispered the only truth left. "I'm sorry." And for the first time, she meant it. That same morning, Nathan stood on a rooftop overlooking the awakening city. He felt the wind press against his face, and for once, it didn't sting. Below him, the world moved on. Cars, lights, lives he didn't belong to anymore. And that was okay. He smiled, a quiet, unforced curve of peace. The gift he'd sent had finished its purpose, but what it gave back to him was something no revenge could buy: release. Weeks passed and the city's noise softened into background music for a life quietly rebuilding itself. Nathan found rhythm again. Work, sleep, walks at dusk. Yet sometimes at the edges of his calm memories flickered like dying embers. Her laughter, his betrayal, the man he once was. But instead of fear, he felt gratitude. The storm had stripped him bare, and what remained was finally real. He no longer measured life by what he'd lost, but by how deeply he could breathe without it. Claire moved into a smaller apartment overlooking the same river Nathan once walked beside. She didn't tell anyone. She just needed silence. The letters were gone, burned, but their ashes still lived in her thoughts. Some nights, she stood by the window watching the lights ripple across the water, whispering his name like a prayer. It wasn't longing. It was repentance, the quiet kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding. One evening, Nathan received a letter in his mailbox. No return address, no handwriting he recognized, just his name written in soft graphite. Inside, a single page. "I finally understand. Thank you for letting me." There was no signature, but he didn't need one. He folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer beside his camera lenses and smiled. It wasn't reconciliation, it was recognition. that their stories had finally reached their quiet end. Claire began volunteering at the local shelter on weekends. It wasn't redemption she was after, it was usefulness. Holding broken stories in her hands reminded her that pain, when shared, could heal instead of harm. Every face she met mirrored something of herself. Regret, resilience, the fragile courage to start again. And in that reflection, she felt a quiet mercy. Nathan printed one final photograph. A shot from his morning runs of the rising sun breaking through the fog. He framed it and hung it above his desk. Below it, he taped a small note. Begin again. The world outside no longer hurt to look at. It moved, it shimmered, it forgave. As the evening wind rattled the window, Nathan closed his eyes and let it in. Not as a memory of loss, but as proof he'd survived it. Spring returned quietly. The air felt lighter, and the city carried a new kind of stillness, as if forgiving itself for winter. Nathan wandered through an outdoor market, camera hanging loosely around his neck. He wasn't chasing stories anymore. He was simply witnessing them. The laughter of strangers, the smell of oranges, the hum of living. All of it felt like proof that life could be ordinary again. At the far end of the market, he saw her, Claire, standing near a flower stall, paying for tulips. She looked different. Softer, quieter, as if she had learned to carry her sadness without letting it spill. Their eyes met for a single heartbeat. Neither of them moved. The world around them continued, unbothered. For once, that was enough. Nathan walked closer, not out of longing but gratitude. When he stopped before her, neither spoke right away. The silence between them was no longer pain. It was peace. She smiled faintly, and he returned it. "You look well," she said. "So do you," he answered. That was all. 2 sentences closing an entire story. No apologies, no explanations. Just truth distilled to its gentlest form. They parted with the ease of people who finally understood that endings can be kind. Nathan turned down the street, sunlight spilling ahead of him. Behind him, Claire tucked one tulip into her coat pocket, a small, bright thing for the road home. Somewhere deep inside, both knew they had already given each other everything they could, truth and the space to heal from it. That evening, Nathan developed his final roll of film. Among the portraits of strangers in city corners, one image stood out, Claire, framed by tulips, her smile faint but whole. He pinned it beside the sunrise photo and stepped back. The wall no longer felt like history. It felt like life. He whispered a quiet thank you to the silence that had shaped him, then turned off the light. Outside, the city pulsed with renewal, and Nathan, for the first time in years, felt perfectly at peace with the world and with himself.